Number 7?
Ranked heavyweights coming up this weekend. We have the 7th ranked Shamil Abdurakhimov, and full transparency before we started, I might even include it. Matt goes, number 7? Shamil Abdurakhimov, he's taking on where is he? 10th ranked Chris Daukaus. And yes, he's Kyle's brother. And in this fight, for Kyle's brother, I joke, he's looked insane so far in the UFC. I didn't expect any of this out of Chris Daukaus. I knew he was good, representing Martinez BJJ, but holy smokes. I mean, you look at the loss to Sean Teed back in 2015. He was supposed to rematch with Sean Teed at the start of 2020. He gets the call up to the UFC, fights Parker Porter, and the rest is history. Knocks him out. Knocks out Nascimento. Knocks out Alexei Oleinik. And in the Oleinik fight, it was like, okay, Oleinik's a wizard on the ground. We know this. Sergey Spivak learned that, even though he won. But you know how good Oleinik can be. And in those exchanges up against the fence, that's where Chris Daukaus shone. And even in some of his other fights, the fight against Azunia Anyanwu that was in the UFC, that was in Bellator, Daukaus was putting it on him until he got clipped, and he got finished in that fight. Daukaus is great up against the cage. He's one of those guys that moves forward with the long looping, I'd say short hooks, but they're so long that they don't really move way out. But he just walks forward, boxes guys' ears in, and finishes them. But the one thing that we haven't seen, Matt, out of Chris Daukaus, and hopefully for him he doesn't have to showcase it in this fight, what is it?
His grappling. It's weird. Chris Daukaus is probably number 1 skill set is his grappling, but we haven't even seen it yet in the UFC, and that's the craziest thing. Like, it would be one thing if he's going out there dropping guys with his hands and then submitting them after they're on the ground. It's not enough for him to do that, though. He's just going out and finishing guys with his hands, and that's extremely impressive, because it's weird. There's almost like this new wave of heavyweights all of a sudden, and they're a little bit smaller than all these other heavyweights. You have guys like Tom Aspinall, guys like Chris Daukaus, who you might look at them and you're like, oh, well, they're not nearly as big as like Derek Lewis or Francis Ngannou or a lot of these other guys in the division. It doesn't matter, though. It was something that we brought up in the Adrian Yanez-Randy Costa fight. Speed matters, and speed at heavyweight is absolutely important. And the fact that Chris Daukaus can basically walk into most of these fights knowing that he's not only slightly faster, he's so much faster than most of these guys, especially in the striking. It must be a huge confidence booster for him.
You look at Chris Daukaus, and so far in the UFC, he's gone down in weight. And in the fight against Parker Porter, let's bring it up. He weighed in at 241. Then he fought Rodrigo Nascimento. He weighed in at 227. For his last fight, he weighed 234. So he did go up a little bit. But I honestly thought, hey, okay, the move's to light heavyweight. That was what his plan was. But now all of a sudden, he's ranked at heavyweight, taking on the 7th ranked Shamil Abdurakhimov. And the weird thing is, we haven't heard of him in forever. He was booked in fights last year against Cyril Gane, but I'm going to try and read this one properly. Gane withdrew from the fight due to pneumothorax. Did I get that one correct? People out there, let me know. Then Abdurakhimov withdrew out of their second fight. Abdurakhimov supposed to fight Augusto Sakai back a few months ago, but Sakai got rebooked, and now we end up with Abdurakhimov here. The weirdest thing about Shamil Abdurakhimov, and well, it's one weird thing, I watched his last fight at Buffalo Wild Wings in Bangor, Maine.
Dubs.
Before I went to, it was called School of Hard Knocks with NEF, and I covered that fight card. Rob Font was there. Wow. Rob Font was there. Not fighting, but he was there. I saw him. I talked to referee John English you want the whole story. But I watched that fight. It was me and my wife at B-Dub-Dubs. Like, it's a big deal. We don't have B-Dub-Dubs in New Brunswick. So we watched that fight. We ended up leaving after that. It was a great trip. But the point of it is, I remember that Curtis Blades fight like the back of my hand, because it was all Curtis Blades doing what normally Shamil Abdurakhimov does to most other fighters.
And it was really weird. And I do think Shamil Abdurakhimov is one of those fighters where offensively, yes, his grappling's very good, but if you can actually get him on the defensive and on the back foot, he does struggle off of his back. I know he's got really good grappling, but again, when you kind of get past almost welterweight, like even middleweight, light heavyweight, and heavyweight, it's very rare to see submissions off guys' backs unless you're like Fabricio Verdum or Jacare Souza. And even Jacare doesn't have a lot of submissions off his back. Just the bigger you are, it's harder to really use your weight and to move another guy around like that. So for Shamil Abdurakhimov, I think he's going to have areas where he might have slight amounts of success in this fight, but other than just the offensive takedown, I don't think he can strike with Chris Daukaus at all. I don't think he has the hand speed or the technique to be on the feet with Daukaus, and I don't think he has the cardio advantage over Chris Daukaus. So other than maybe just trying to grind out Daukaus against the cage, I'm finding it very, very difficult to find even areas where Abdurakhimov going to have the edge over Daukaus in this fight.
Abdurakhimov coming into this fight, almost 40 years old, 39 and 10 months when he makes the walk to the cage. I want to list off the wins. We don't normally normally do this deep dive through records, but in the UFC, wins over Freight Train Hamilton, Walt Harris, Chase Sherman, Arlovsky, and Tybura. The Tybura fight, one that kind of ages like fine wine, and Marcin was on the downturn at that point too. The losses, Tim Johnson, Derek Lewis, and then, of course, Curtis Blades. And for Tim Johnson, did he look good against Moldavski his last time out? No, but Tim Johnson, he's got those looping hooks, almost like Chris Daukaus. If Abdurakhimov can grind out Chris Daukaus, if that size can really wear on him, we've seen Abdurakhimov weighing in up near the limit of heavyweight. Maybe that's going to be his best path to victory. I just have a hard time where I haven't seen Abdurakhimov in a long time. I know he's going from Blades way up at the top to Daukaus, who is making his way up the rankings for sure. He's a great fighter. It's a tricky one for Daukaus, but I do still like him in this one. And again, hopefully from him and his camp, they probably don't want him to showcase his jiu-jitsu in this one because you're going to be on your back if you are. But I do think that Daukaus has a great opportunity with the hands.
So there's a UFC poster just to the right of Craig that has Volkanovski and Anthony Smith's faces on it. Now, you might say, hey, that's not the best main event in the world, but there was once a fight poster that had Shamil Abdurakhimov versus Derek Lewis at the top, and the co-main event was Francis Ngannou against Anthony Freight Train Hamilton. So it got worse. The point is that Shamil Abdurakhimov at one point was in a main event for the UFC, and he looked pretty good against Derek Lewis until he got knocked out. It was kind of the original Derek Lewis gets taken down for 15 minutes until he knocks in his opponent fight. So there has been those glimpses of success from Abdurakhimov in the cage, but he's never been able to keep it up throughout an entire fight. I really do see cardio and striking being on the side of Daukaus. I love Daukaus in this fight.
All right, so we look at the odds for this fight, and Abdurakhimov opened a plus 120, and now he's a plus 159 on best fight odds. For Chris Daukaus, he opened a minus 140, he's a minus 194 or thereabouts. And we have a look at the Tapology votes for this one, Matt. I'm not overly surprised. 959 total votes, 84% Daukaus, 86% by knockout, 8% by decision. For the 16% that have Abdurakhimov, 51% by decision, 37% by knockout. Knocking out Shamil Abdurakhimov is not going to be easy. Curtis Blades did it, but he mixed in a lot of the grappling with it. That was so long ago. Listen, Derek Lewis did it 4 years and 9 months ago. The trouble for me with Abdurakhimov, he's no longer 39, he's 40. Chris Daukaus' birthday is on Saturday. He turns 32, so happy birthday to him. Matt, what are you thinking?
This is a really odd fight, but I was trying to think of different times that we've had contenders in the same division kind of on the same ascension at the same time. For instance, you bring up the Shamil Abdurakhimov main event that he had against Derek Lewis, don't forget. But who was the co-main event of that fight night? It was Francis Ngannou against Anthony Freight Train Hamilton. Now, I'm going to bring it all together. Hear me out. Derek Lewis and Francis Ngannou, when they both became contenders, it felt like they were doing it at the same time. We have these two guys. We're not going to let them fight each other until they both get to the top of the division. Then we'll finally put them in the cage
Worst
together.
fight ever.
Worst fight ever. Then we had, I'm going to say Cyril Gahn and Jairzinho Rosenstruck they were sort of coming up at the same time. We'll say, I get Jairzinho a little bit earlier, but still, they were both kind of making their rise at the same time. Cyril Gahn gets the win. I feel like Chris Daukaus and Tom Aspinall are kind of the two newest guys who it's okay. These are the young contenders making their rise through the division. It's just a matter of time until they're going to finally get in there with each other, I think. And I do feel like if Chris Daukaus is able to get the win over Abdurakhimov, that's probably the next fight.
And I mean, if you look at it for Aspinall, it was going to be the boxing and the pressure from Sergey Pavlovich, but he gets a nice test and a grappler, and Sergey Spivak looks amazing. For Daukaus, I've had questions about his striking in the past, because again, against Zhu Enyanwu, and that's what? His last loss, he was winning that fight until he didn't. And if you look at it, his wrestling defense, how good is it? I know how good his grappling is. We're going to find that tested here against Abdurakhimov. I still like Chris Daukaus in this fight. I love his straight punches. I love when he comes forward. He proved it to me against, this is going to sound so weird. If you told me this like 8 months ago, I'd go, what? But the win over Parker Porter continues to look better. And I just like his overall well-rounded game. For Abdurakhimov, I haven't seen him in 2 years. I didn't like what I saw. Again, he beat Tybura. That was great. Almost 3 years ago. He beat Arlovsky almost 3 years ago. He beat Chase Sherman 3.5 years ago. I just haven't seen it. And now he's 40. So I like Chris Daukaus to be the fresher, younger fighter that's continued to put it together and improve before our very own eyes.
UFC, give us UFC Philly or UFC London and have it headlined by Chris Daukaus versus Tom Aspinall. I'm doing your job for you guys.
Liverpool. Let's make it happen. I've got Daukaus. Matt has Daukaus in this one. We absolutely love the fight. And 14 of them on this card. 2 title fights up the top. You're not going to want to miss any of it. So keep locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.